Welcome to the Top 5 Sports Podcast, and I'm your host, Chike Ubaka. And here on this show, we talk about all top 5 sports related topics circling around the world of sports. If this is your first time on here, I want to use this opportunity to welcome you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and be part of a Top 5 family. If you're already subscribed, welcome back. Happy to have you. So my guest today is my crazy friend, Mahmoud, aka Jimad. How you feeling,
Hey,
brother?
what's up? Thanks for having me, bro.
It's always a pleasure,
Yeah,
man. Always
like
a pleasure,
I was
man.
wondering when I was gonna finally get the invite. I've been looking at you. I was like, okay, all right. Eventually, eventually, it's
I
gonna
had a
get to
little bit
me,
of
but it's all good though. It's all love.
right. That's my bad. First of all, you were definitely one of the top guests that I have. Obviously, because of your sports knowledge and everything you know about sports. So a little bit, I owe you one. So that's my bad. I apologize for that. But you're here now,
Yeah,
man.
let's
So
do it. Let's do it.
let's uh let's get right into it, man. A lot of crazy things going on in the world of sports today, in soccer, basketball, NFL, even in tennis and Formula One. Anything stick out to you recently?
Just a lot of obviously like football, like getting kicked off, like just seeing all the buzz, like looking at how all the new draft picks and the new like signings are doing, both in like Premier League and like basketball. Obviously, like it's still it's still kind of like in the air, like where everyone is gonna turn out. There's football as well. I'm a big Formula One fan, so like Formula One today, like for example, like the race tomorrow is gonna be like basically you have like your top drivers. However, they're
Right.
all like kind of starting from the back of the grid. So usually when you have that,
Yeah, that's
there's
Hamilton and Carlos,
yeah.
right?
So
Lewis
Sainz,
Hamilton and
like
Carlos Sainz.
Hamilton, I believe Perez as well. He drives for Red Bull. Um, so they all took like different penalties, like which we'll get into at some point. But basically, they're gonna start at the back of the grid. So usually, when you have drivers like that have like really fast cars and they're starting at the back, like you can expect a lot of like overtaking and stuff like that, which makes the race crazy, anyways. But yeah,
Yeah, it's Monza. I think it's the Italian
yeah,
Grand Prix, right? There's a lot
Like
of
I really want
there's a
to.
lot of
That's on my bucket list for sure.
I know for sure. Like there's a lot of over the years the winners. I think it was I don't know who won it last night. It might have been Charles
Leclerc,
or
yeah, Leclerc, yeah, the
Ricardo.
Ferrari, yeah,
Charles,
yeah,
yeah, Charles. And he actually he has pole position this time
yeah.
around. So
And it's crazy because we were talking about it
that's
the other day, and you said he was gonna get it again.
right.
Yeah, that
He
was
was gonna
crazy. I
get it.
actually thought
Yeah,
about you
yeah,
today when he got the pole.
yeah. I just had a feeling like he always has something about the Italian
Yeah,
Grand Prix, especially being a
yeah.
Ferrari driver. So yeah. Well, that's another conversation for another day. So basically in this episode, this is a headline episode. We're kind of breaking down the top 5 news circling around the world of sports as of this moment. And to start off with, at number 5, we have Serena Williams announced her retirement. So on August 9th, with Vogue magazine, Serena Williams announced her retirement from the game of tennis after a 27-year career that included a record 23 Grand Slam titles, which is the most in the Open era. Serena, who turned 41 in September, revealed that while she loved tennis, she was ready to move on to new things. She also added, "It's the hardest thing that I could ever imagine." Just to read a couple of her stats here, which is actually mind blowing. But her record playing tennis is 858 wins to 154 losses. So that's about an 84, yeah, 84% win percentage. 84 win percentage for Serena Williams. She has 73 Grand Slam titles, following one of the great Margaret Court that has 74. 7 Australian Opens, 3 French Opens, 7 Wimbledons, 6 U.S. Opens, and 4 Olympic gold medals, including 3 doubles and a single. She lost to I hope I don't butcher her name, but Ajla Tomnankovic recently in the U.S. Open, which turned out to be her final match of her great career. Um, I mean, as where do we start from with Serena? She's, in my own opinion, she's arguably one of the greatest athletes to ever grace or play sports. Push aside anything that has to do with gender or color, race, whatever. Arguably, I think that Serena is up there top five, and we're talking about the likes of Tom Brady, Lionel Messi, Ronaldo, Michael Jordan, LeBron, Tiger Woods, you name it, right? Like she paved the way not only for so many people, but her dominance in the game, right? From three different decades to still be
Yeah,
relevant. I mean, bro, that's
yeah.
out of this world for me.
So yeah, bro, like you touched on it, like Serena is easily like greatest athlete. Not just we're not even like you said, put the genders like just of all time. Like if you think about like the era in which she came into tennis, like herself and Venus. Number one, there weren't many African American like female tennis players at the time, or tennis players, just like as a fact, like there just weren't many of them. And then when you think about the fact that all the barriers that she had to encounter, and then I think like if you ask me, just I know myself just growing up through that era, I know like we watched tennis a lot as kids. And I remember like watching Serena and, as a kid, she was very like the thing that struck me at that time, at that age was, wow, like this lady, she's like yelling, like she's always so like passionate and like everything, right? So it wasn't until I grew older that I understood that they they kind of were trying to use that against her, right? Like, the oh yeah, she's very like, just crazy and aloof, and her like wardrobe, she's had like wardrobe
Like
issues, like
a crazy black
yeah,
woman, right?
exactly. So that will touch on like we've all been through that, like the barriers like you have to break as an African American in a white dominated sport, right? So what impresses me about Serena is not only does she create her own style, so she was very, very, very public with her outfits. Like her outfits always made a statement, but also she was very, very like vocal on the tennis court. Like she wore her heart on the sleeve, right? Which a lot of times they try to use against her. But I think once she got like very comfortable in her skin and she started to what I call psychologically dominate her opponents, I think at that point it was just a matter of how many Grand Slams she was going to win. So I call that even the Tiger Woods effect too. Like this was kind of similar to what
Yeah.
Tiger Woods did. The only difference is Tiger Woods was kind of trained by his dad to have that from a young age. So his dad was an ex like Green Beret, so he trained him in golf like with a kind of killer mindset that if you're not, it's not just about winning. So winning was just like a byproduct. Like for his dad, it's like you have to dominate, you have to psychologically humiliate your opponent every single time. And that was the attitude that Tiger Woods came on to. Of course, being like at the time the only black golfer, like so he had targets on his back. So he would come and just dominate and intimidate his opponents, like without even saying a word. Like he would just be Tiger Woods, and I'm sure you've seen it when he wears that flashy red and black on
Yeah.
Sunday.
Once he
You
puts
know
on
what time
the
it is.
puts the red on, yeah.
But yeah, back to Serena
Yeah.
though. Like I think um, just it's just a little bit bittersweet because I feel like she could have won way more Grand Slams. I think there was a time there where she was on a run where like I remember like it was almost like if you think about it, she was number one like right here, and everyone else was like down here. So that was when you had like the Justine Hanina Dan, like you had her, like you had Maria Sharapova, like at the time, Victoria Azarenka, like you had a lot of them, Anna Ivanovic, like they were all upcoming tennis stars and they were very, very talented. But whenever it came to Serena, I'm talking like, bro, like you go through an entire like Grand Slam, right? And they're fighting competitive matches, and then you go meet Serena in the final, and it's not even close. Like she beats them in straight sets. Like I was just before we came on here, I was just looking at some of her highlights, and she was like crip walking after just winning like the final of a Grand Slam against Maria
Yeah.
Sharapova, who was the world number two at the time. Beat her 6-1, 6-0, like 6 love. Like
Wait, was that the Olympic Games
yeah, yeah, it was
in
the Olympics. Yeah,
2012? Olympic, yeah, yeah, yeah. That I had that as one of the greatest Serena moments I have personally
it
experienced
was
because
insane.
I picked up on tennis at a. I would say I always knew who the guys were and the women too as well, but I picked it up at a late stage. But that Olympic here, that was when I was like, oh wow, this is not your regular
Yeah,
tennis player. Like she hadn't lost any set, only in the final
yeah,
during
and
that
now she lost
Olympic
one set, one
run.
one
Just
game.
one,
Yeah,
exactly, just
yeah,
one set. I wanted to. So you talked about the like you had a good comparison with Tiger Woods and his dad, and I started thinking about the King Richard movie, right? With Will Smith, the one he played. And when I saw the movie, I kind of saw the in-depth life that she really had with Venus, right? And I see a little bit of similarities in how uh, the father shaped her up to be who she was, right? Like in the movie, it's not really centered around Serena, it's more around Venus, right? Because it feels like Venus was the one coming out as the star initially. But I think at the end of the movie, um, the dad had a comment to Serena where she was like, "Why aren't you playing me? Like, why am I not being there?" And he goes to her and he tells her, "Because you're gonna win. You're gonna be the greatest ever." He made that comment to her in the movie. So I was just thinking about how much influence the dad had in their lives, and till this day, like even in their games, being their trainer and the coach, just the impact of
yeah.
fatherhood towards athletes and what that outcome is like.
Yeah, you touched on it, bro. Like the and in fact, yeah, very very big like parallels that you can draw, right? Like in terms of like their childhood, like growing up in like Compton and like that area in California, like what life was like then, and then like you're already like in a community that's like dangerous in its own self, but try to as a father try to shelter your kids from that while also trying to shape them for something greater. Like it's like just when you think about like all those things, like it just makes the story so much more impressive, where where they came from. But at the time, like the father almost like seeing the future and saying like you're gonna be the
Yeah,
greatest.
yeah,
Like it's just
yeah. That's
like
that's
seeing that come
that's
full
like
circle. Like I always wonder with like celebrities if like they ever have those conversations with like their parents. Obviously a lot of them, their parents are no more, right? Like so you see that emotion a lot of times when they win and they continue to win, right? But like you just wonder if they have those conversations. Like remember when I told you that day in like 1986 that you were gonna be the
yeah.
greatest?
And it's crazy because now like just to touch on a little bit of, not to go really out of context, but like talking about fatherhood and the greatest athletes that ever played. Like you talk about like Michael Jordan, right? How much his dad meant to him. You talk about Tom Brady, where he gets his drive and his motivation from. You could also talk about LeBron because his dad wasn't in his life, but now he's like a really great father figure to a lot of people. So um I just see how important the dad played a role in their life, and Serena turned out to be one of the greatest
Yeah,
athletes period in the
yeah.
world, like
Absolutely,
single-handedly.
and
So
like if you and one thing is, you see like women's tennis. I think if you go back in history and you look at like the greatest players in the world, like one thing was very very certain was that they had a very dominant style of play. like they will pin you to your baseline a lot of times. Like if you look at like even if you look at Martina Hingis, she was from Czech Republic. Like Martina Hingis was like somebody who like I remember like at the time it was only her and a few other people that had a dominant serve like in the women's game, but she battled a lot of injury issues. But if you look at like Billie Jean King, like Billie Jean King like dominated like tennis in like the 60s and the 70s, but she had a very aggressive like playing style, which was not common at the time. So like a lot of the greatest like women's tennis players, like they had a very strong backhand. You look at even Chrissy Everett. Like Chrissy Everett had like a crazy backhanded, a two-handed forehand, right? Like so she would, and whenever that happens, is that you're not allowing the open opponent to get into their rhythm of the game. You're always pinning them back into their own baseline. So like Serena just came onto the scene and took that next level. So she had that physical dominance, like in that she was very athletic, right? Even her body was she was very intimidating. But psychologically she would intimidate you by the way she yells, like she would look at you after like points. She would like stare you down and say, yes, like I'm like this is what I'm gonna do to you. Like you ain't seen nothing yet, you know. And she would do this. She would do this to motivate herself, even in matches where she was down, where she
Right.
had to dig herself out of a hole. And that's why, like, I mean, I'm biased towards golf, right? Like, I play golf. Like, I still feel like golf is a very tough sport, like mentally. But I don't think any sport comes near like tennis, just in terms of like the mental strength you need to have because it's just you and yourself on that court. Like literally, you have that one person in front of you. At least golf, it's you versus yourself. So it's anyone's guess. It's subjective, right? People can say it's a tougher test when you're fighting demons against yourself. But in tennis, you're doing that,
Right.
and also you have someone who is hitting the ball at you at 120 miles an hour with top spin and you have to react to every single thing they're doing. And then you could be in a position where you're about to come back into the match, and then you make two mistakes, and all of a sudden it's championship point, and you have to dig yourself out of that hole. You know that if you hit this ball into the net, it's over. Like that's it. Like that's the game, and you have to dig yourself out. And imagine if you need to break the opponent's serve, like so they're the ones serving against you. So they're serving for the match. Like the crowd is already clapping because they're like, oh yeah, this is about to be over. Like she's about to serve like an ace, and it's wraps and you have to
It's
dig
raps. Yeah.
dig yourself out and say, okay, I just need to get this back to deuce. If I could break this serve and back into this match, like literally. So in tennis, there are
Yeah.
very fine margins. Like it could, you know, like the difference. If you look at the greatest matches in the world, like the difference between like things turning around, like for example, I could count so many Roger Federer matches or Nadal or like matches where they could tell you, yes, this was a turning point. Like I hit a backhand winner down the baseline and that was it, boom, and you have your opponent rattled. All of a sudden now they're like second guessing everything they're doing, you know. So
I like the word that you use is fighting. It's like fighting your own demons while you're being in
yeah,
the court, playing. Like my cousin played varsity, and I tried to play. I'm not a huge tennis guy. Like I don't play tennis a lot, but I tried playing with him, and he was just varsity. Like he wasn't even college or anything. But man, bro, like you talk about technique of a
yeah,
serve. So I could imagine like what these pro athletes do. But yeah, just wanted to give Serena her flowers. Again, I think she's hands down one of the greatest athletes to ever play the game of tennis or just sports in general. And just felt like we needed to touch on that. Serena Williams, we wish you nothing but the best in your post career. I know it's definitely going to be a lot of great things for you, and yeah, keep on being the queen that you are.
absolutely,
So,
yeah,
Serena Williams, retired man. Wish you all the best. All right. Second segue away from the sports of tennis into what we are a little bit familiar with, soccer. As many people will know in our country, Nigeria, we call it
Football,
football.
always.
Um, Especially in this season, the Premier League. So the Premier League started in August. We're about a month away, and we kind of just wanted to break down what the best Premier League signings is so far. There's been a lot of great signings. I don't even know where to start from, but I do have a feeling we might agree on this or disagree. I don't know, but there's been a lot of great signings in this space. So I'll give you the floor, man. What has been your best Premier League signing so far?
Oof, that's a tough one. Like I don't like. I always like a lot of times people ask.
That's how I said. That's how I said you're going to be a little bit
Yeah,
biased because I kind of feel, but I want to get
yeah,
your
it's a
thoughts on
tough
that.
one because I feel like I have like a few, but just even I won't even say bias. Like even okay, you can put the bias in there, but hands down, it has to be Gabriel Jesus, right? It
I knew it. So okay, tell the people what team you support. So at least this all makes
okay.
sense.
Well, I'm an Arsenal fan. I mean, if you didn't already guess it, but and if you didn't already guess, my host is a Man U fan, so he knows why he's laughing.
There
But
you go, man.
it's
Of
still top
course,
of the
man.
league. But oh well, whatever.
Hey,
But
man.
yeah, but
Let's see.
back to it though. Like so, if you look at it, right, if you're being very objective, so when you look at what constitutes as a very good signing, right, you have to look at what the current market is for players in that position. Then you look at, of course, like the biggest thing is the value, right? Like how much money was paid for the player, and then their impact, right? So if you look at let's go down the list. So if we talk about best signings, right? And my fellow Arsenal fans might murder me for saying this, but I feel like the team that did the best business this summer was Tottenham Hotspurs. And yes, like all my fellow
Okay.
Arsenal fans might like murder me, but I feel like Tottenham did a lot of good business, right? Because if you look at like Richarlison, like they got Richarlison for like 60 million, which I mean, for some people maybe they overpaid, right? But Richarlison is an assist god. Like he's one of those people that plays kind of similar to how Son plays. Like he can like draw that attention away. Like when Son, when you see Son, Kane, like Lucas, all those guys, like when they're all attacking, like those are like there's a way they could play where they could create more goals without actually stuffing the start sheet. Another good signing they made was Bisuma. Like they got Bisuma for what about 25 million pounds from Brighton, and then who else? Like who else comes to mind? Then of course, like coming to Arsenal, like you have Alexander Zinchenko, who was gotten. They got what Zinchenko for about 30 million thereabouts. So if you look at the contribution, like just from a number stat, right? In the world of soccer today, there aren't many crazy strikers. Obviously, we're gonna go to Erling Haaland. Like we can't like talk about signings without Haaland, right? But if you look at the money that was paid, and yes, Haaland at the time was, I would say, arguably like he was like top three best strikers in the world at the time. Like he what scored like 42 goals for Dortmund, like the year before scored like 26 goals, like top scorer in the Champions League, all that good stuff. We understand that. But if you look at where Arsenal was like this time last year, right? For them to go out into the market, and everyone knew that they needed a number nine, right? Because of course they got rid of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, they got rid of Alexander Lacazette, so everyone knew that Arsenal needed a number nine. Obviously, I love Eddie Nketiah, right? But if you're trying to get like to that level where like you want to start competing, like to be in the Champions League like every year, like Nketiah is not really ripe. Like he's not there yet to lead like the line as a number nine. He's getting there though. He's very close. But I still feel there's an element of naivety with his play that can be improved if he plays behind a striker like Gabriel Jesus. So now,
So
yeah, go ahead.
sorry to jump in. So with the so what I'm getting from the Gabriel Jesus because I assume that's your best Premier League signing so far. So what I'm getting from the Gabriel Jesus signing from you is you see it more as how much you paid for him and what you're
Yes,
getting back,
yes,
right?
yes, absolutely. Like
Okay.
just in terms of, and I'm not saying that. I'm not even saying that. Oh, like we could have gone into the market and paid more for a better striker. It's anybody can argue right now that Jesus is like top five like strikers of the world right now. Like it's an argument that's worth having, right?
Uh,
I mean, it's like I said,
uh,
it's not something that you would shove
there's a
aside,
few
right?
there's a few names there's a few names I could throw out there that might go up, but
No,
I do see
yeah,
where.
because
Go ahead.
we're talking about like current season, right? Like I'm not just speaking generally. Like current season, like Jesus in the Premier League.
Got it. So at this
Yeah,
point in time, right?
after 6 games,
Okay.
3 goals, 3 assists. I mean, like his goal involvement, like he's been involved in 6 goals in 6 games, right? And just if you think about like the body of work, like he plays like almost 90 minutes like every game. He's pressing, like leading the line, like he's terrorizing defenses, right? And a lot of times, like I was mentioning with even like Richarlison, like the Richarlison effect with Tottenham is that when you have a player that has like basically the idea is, and those are the stats that don't necessarily show up, right? It's the fear factor. Like I know as a defender I have to think about like Jesus every time, so that frees up the Martinellis and frees up the Sakas and frees up the Odegaards. Like it gives them space to kind of operate. Like so that's like why I feel like the value of such a player. Like we're talking like to be able to pay just £45 million for this guy. Like in today's market was definitely a big steal. But if I'm being like super unbiased, like I mean, hands down, like the best signing has to be Erling Haaland, right? Like, I mean,
That's where that's where so uh, to I like the Gabriel Jesus because I did a podcast with KG, and I did talk about Gabriel Jesus coming into the season for Arsenal and how I think he was going to do well, and apparently it is turning out well because he's already had a relationship with Mikel Arteta. He worked with him in Manchester City, and bringing him into Arsenal was kind of like a piece to the
yeah,
puzzle, kind of like just fixing that. So I like that signing. For me, I mean, there's no way I can. Erling Haaland, like so what I did, he has 10 goals and assist in just 24 touches per game.
he actually has
So
12
in
goals. Like
context,
if you
right?
add the Champions League,
No, I took out the Champions League, right? I took out the Champions League because I'm trying to focus in just Premier League. But so he has 10 goals and assists in just 24 touches per game, right? So put that into context. Sorry. 24 touches in a game is basically for every game is 90 minutes. For every 30 minutes, you're seeing the ball at least, I'd say you touch the ball at least 10 times, right? Like that's
it's not a
insane,
stat that you
right?
can really comprehend.
It's exactly, it's not a stat that you can. It's more of those one of those FIFA, ultimate team stats that you do like where you're playing video games like a PS5 or
Yeah.
something. Like you don't see this in like actual gameplay. And
The thing that,
to get him for 60 million, right, is that's a
yeah,
steal because a lot of team I've already paid a ton of money for so many terrible players that in the Premier League I don't even want to mention because most of them are on my team. But it's like you pay that amount of money for a guy who is young, he's fast, he's one of the best finishers in the Premier League. And why I say this is one of the things. So my brother told me something very important, right? So Man City are built to press, right? Play a very high press game, right? If they lose the ball, they get in within
yeah,
25 seconds. That's how they're
yeah.
built, right? But they don't require Haaland to press. And he told me that that's dangerous. And I was like, why is that dangerous? Because it doesn't make sense. City are built to press. He said, because you've given Haaland a free roll in the third of the field to be able to move wherever he wants. That way, City's counter-attacking football just got better, right? So whenever you have the team doing a press, Haaland is looking for pockets in the game to make
Yeah.
those runs. And if you look at all his
All the
goals that
goals
he
this season.
scored,
Yep.
he's always finding a pocket of
Yep.
space, and they haven't had a striker in the longest time. Like Aguero was always built into the
Yeah.
play, right? He
He
would
had to be
always
part
build
of the
within the
play.
play,
Yeah.
but he ought to be part of the play exactly. But Haaland, you don't see him. The team now is built to win the ball and give it to Haaland, and that is why potentially I think Haaland might break, or I'm not even saying break, might shatter Mo Salah's record, Premier League record for goals. He might actually reach 40 because if you just use 1 month to get 10 goals and you're this consistent, bro, I'm not even gonna lie, man.
The
This dude literally could
so
score
I'll
42
even
league goals.
I'll peel it back. I'll even take it like one step further, right? Like when you think about like what the stereotypical number nine is, right? Haaland is everything opposite of that. Like just in terms of his physical attributes, right? This guy is taller than most of your center backs. So already he's already intimidating center backs because he's bigger than most of them. Then he has insane ball skills. So basically,
Mm-hmm.
again, like just like if you liken it to basketball, like the taller you are, like the science just states that you're not as good
The,
on the ball
yeah,
just because of your
yeah,
center of gravity, like your footwork and all that, right? He has insane ball skills. He has pace to beat like any defender in the world, and then he's an intelligent football player. Like he
very
knows
brilliant, very
he
very smart.
knows where to position himself. Like when a corner is being played and you just see that striker that just sags off a little bit, you know that that ball is gonna fall out to any area, and
And
you have to be ready to
that
pounce.
that was a point I was gonna bring up. Right, City now have City now have the luxury of scoring
Any
anyhow.
kind of
Like
goals.
they can any kind of goals. Right, they didn't have that luxury with Aguero. They didn't have that luxury
Yeah,
with Jesus. Right, these guys were always, like you said, they were always part of the
yeah.
build up. But now De Bruyne could just whip it in, and you already know that ball is
You
coming on
know it's
Haaland's
coming.
head.
Yeah, literally.
So
Like they they're a
it's
set piece like
coming.
force now, which is crazy. That even makes them more scary.
Right, which is crazy, more
Yeah.
scary, and that's why I have him as my best signing so far. But you never know.
Yeah,
Again,
I think
I the
I
Jesus,
think yeah, I think it's like obviously the stats say that it's Holland by a country mile, right? But I
right,
think
right,
where
right,
I'm
right.
coming from is if you look at the teams that they went to join prior to them joining and them joining, right? Like Holland is just he's plugging, like you said, Holland in a different team, right? He's still gonna get his goals just because he's just that player. But if you don't have the build-up play that City have, with all the guys with like De Bruyne, like with like all the pieces they have around them, right? Like with Gundogan, like all those guys. Like if you don't have guys that are smart to play those passes, like it's gonna nullify like the strengths that Haaland has. So my point is like City already has that like blueprint, but Jesus on the other hand, he was coming to an Arsenal team where yes, like they improved like a country mile like last year, right? But Arteta still wanted them to play a certain way, like to lead the press from the front, which like Lacazette could do like a decent amount. Like he had good hold up play, but Lacazette was just not as ruthless. Like so, he didn't really put fear into into defenders because they know okay, like he's gonna press, but Lacazette would need an average of like 4 chances a game to score one, right? Whereas Jesus, like he would need like 1.3 or 1.4. So
So I never, I was always curious about the whole Lacazette project. Like, why did that never work? Like, that was a guy who I I admired him so
yeah,
much, especially coming
from the
from
Leon, yeah.
Lyon. But I never figured out why it never
So I
worked.
think with Lacazette, right, like you have to think about the fact that it's also unfair. Like I don't think like he gets like fair criticism, which I mean rightly so. It's a dog eat dog world, right? As a striker, like goals is what you're judged on, right? But if you look at the fact that Lacazette like came through the Wenger era, the Emery era, like went through like even Lumberg for a little bit, and then the Arteta era, right? Like all those managers had.
Oh yeah, y'all actually had Bloomberg. Wow.
So all those managers like had a certain style like they wanted to play. Like Wenger loved like the fact that Giroud could hold up the ball, which yes, like I said, can do it very well. But if you think about the fact that we didn't have white players that could make an impact. So it did not allow Lacazette to flourish because where Lacazette will flourish is in a situation where you get him 1v1. If he's 1v1 with your defender, then he has he has the ability to find players. So he's a smart guy. So but because of the way Arsenal was playing, Arsenal were very, very midfield like centric. Like we didn't have a lot of width to our play. So what then happens is it allows like the fullbacks to like kind of sag more into the field and it makes the field feel like it's more choked up. So in that situation, right, how you can combat that is that you need to have players that are technical that can play 1-2 football and break the lines. Like you can't like in that kind of situation where like the field is very, very choked up. Now, unfortunately, Arsenal as kind of we've lost those the Fabregas era and the era Ramses and like the Jack Wilshere's like players that were good, Thomas Rosicky, like Samir Nasri, like these were players that were good with I call it like the Pep Tiki Taka football. But now we've come to the eras of the Granit Xhakas, like the El Nenis, like the like we have you we have like so but
I'm so sorry. Like when I try to compare those,
yeah, but
I
so
see like when you say those, it does make sense. Like there's a
yeah,
difference in technicality with those
so
players.
now what has happened is the players that are around Lacazette, and even you talk about like obviously Mesut Ozil like played with Lacazette as well, right? And part of the reasons why like Ozil as well did not like flourish in that system is Ozil worked really well with players like that are like-minded thinkers, very technical on the ball. They can play 1-2 football, so he can find that pass. But now in a slow build-up play like Granit Xhaka, like I love Xhaka actually. Like it's not a shade on him, but he's not built for that kind of football. He's more of a box-to-box midfielder, right? And like the box-to-box system, if you see now like this season, like Arteta is playing Xhaka more advanced. So he's actually having Xhaka be more a part of the play just because of he's
More
yeah,
important, yeah.
because Xhaka can actually pass the ball. He's smart, right? Yeah, he might not be as quick as those like little technical players, but Xhaka he has the effect where he can shoot. So he has the goal scoring side to him. He's good with set pieces and he can find passes, right? So he's has that like physical presence to make that extra defender think that oh yeah, Xhaka is here, right? But like I was saying, like it just that width, like I said, will flourish in a system where there's a lot of width. So in that situation,
Where
like
there's a lot of width,
you're gonna
yeah.
allow like your striker to be able to have a 1v1.
To
So
be
yeah, in
able,
that case, I think that's why it
because
just didn't work out.
that's why I just it was just a question I wanted to pop out. But yeah, that does make sense in the aspect of having a player with the technical skills to actually pull out what you actually want to execute on
Yeah,
the field. So I yeah, I that's so those are I would say those are pretty decent. I mean, if you ask anybody, like Haaland or Jesus, those are the two names that come out. So it's not one of those. I mean, obviously, like you said, with the stats, Erling Haaland has more to talk about, but with Gabriel Jesus too as well. He's been exceptional for Arsenal, especially you guys being top of the league. So you definitely have to give him his credit in that
yeah,
aspect. So moving on to number three, what we want to talk about in the world of sports is it's kind of like still staying around the world of soccer, but just more focusing on the best Premier League team so far. It's been a month, like I said, of Premier League football, and for me, I think obviously I'm gonna go with Man City, right? Um, I think so. Something that I noticed, right, is City are, Manchester City are conceding a lot of goals, right? That's something that I noticed, right? They're conceding a lot of goals. Usually during August, the Premier League launch, they're very dominant. They kill teams once, 5-0, 4-0, but now they're coming back, right? They have to come back from behind. But why I picked Manchester City is because they are showing a lot of resiliency, right? And that's what you notice in teams that are, championship caliber, right? They've been playing together for such a long time under Pep, and they're used to winning, right? They're used to just killing teams, but now other teams are figuring out how to score them, right? So the question is, if you're used to winning, how are you able to react to losing, right? And City have shown so many times this season coming from behind, right? And that is very dangerous because one of the biggest issues I had with Pep was his adjustments, right? Adjusting to games, kind of tweaking your formations, right? Because Pep's system is very strong. It's like a mechanic. He wants you to play a certain way, and you have to play that way a whole 90 minutes. But now I'm beginning to see he adjusts his system a little bit, which is very, very dangerous. Because I always hold it against Pep Guardiola that the reason why he hasn't won the Champions League with Manchester City is because of that adjustment in game, right? But now we're beginning to see it. Like, say, for example, against Crystal Palace, right? These guys were down 2-0. Second half, they come in, they bring in a couple players, and you notice the adjustment that they start making, right? It's not more of a system, it's more of understanding when to react to pressure, understanding when to push up, understanding when to drop in the midfield. So the question I'm having now is Pep beginning to listen to me? Let me put it that way, or let me put it in a more easy way. Like, is Pep actually adjusting his system? Because if he's doing that, then I have to say, man, it's not even the Premier League people should be worried about. It's the Champions League. Because now he's getting to a point where you take this kind of style to the Champions League, and the Champions League is a big boys league. Like, it's not the Premier League. It's like you're going in there, different countries, different style of football, right? But now you're being able to adjust. You're being able to adjust. You can be in game situations like in the game against Madrid last year, or the game against the Champions League final against Manchester City, right? Those were the games that I wanted Pep to adjust, right? You don't have to always implement your system. It works sometimes, but there's just times in the games where you just have to adjust. So that's why I have the best Premier League team so far, um, Manchester City. They've won 4 games, they've drawn 2. Obviously, it's just a month of football that has been played, but um, they've just been
Yeah,
exceptional. Like, I think in their own way, they've been
I think
amazing.
yeah. I mean, you hit it on the head. I think if we're being, just objective with like the stats, the body of work, and all that, right? Like it's very very difficult when you're the hunted, like when you're being the one like being hunted, like constantly. Like City always has to come back and mentally like put themselves back. It's hard to remotivate yourself when you've been to the mountaintop. And I know we were talking about this like the other time, right? Like you've seen like success, and to come back every year, to ground yourself, go back to basics, and always like so continue to sustain that level. And like you said, the comeback factor, like how many games like Crystal Palace, like so many games like they've had to come back from behind. But I think, just for the sake of us not being redundant, I think like for me, like I would say like my best Premier League team this season has been Fulham. And if you
Oh,
if you
okay,
if you
okay,
look at,
okay.
because obviously everybody knew like Mitrovic was like doing a big thing in the championship last year. Like he was like scoring a lot of goals, right? But this guy, like the degree of difficulty, because if you look at like Fulham, right, like they have like Ardobayo, like Tosin, like they have a lot of like very, very, very strong like physical players, which you need in the Premier League, right? But every game, like if you think about like the fact that they know that Mitrovic is the go-to guy, So it's very, very easy, like for you to game plan for him. And this guy still continues to score goals, right? And I think Marco Silva, just as a coach, like he's very, very underrated. Like I think like Marco Silva is a brilliant man.
Absolutely, absolutely
Yeah.
underrated.
So like for me, like
Absolutely.
just if you look at like just for a newly promoted team, like coming to like the Premier League, all the expectations. And of course it's anyone's, there I see all these arguments on Twitter, like everybody's saying, oh, like the Premier League, oh, this is the Premier League everybody is talking about, right? That, like the Premier League is not really top. But if you look at just the money that has been spent, like teams like even Brighton, like Brighton is becoming a force to reckon with. Like Crystal Palace is becoming a force to reckon with. Like a lot of teams, like even like Brentford. Like I mean, you know the Brentford effect. Even my team knows the Brentford effect,
Of
right?
course, of
Like
course, of course.
so I just think like Fulham, like I'm just impressed with how they're playing. Like it's a well-run organization, obviously a London-based team. Like so they have like that fan base. They play at Craven Cottage, which is like an old school like London ground. Like very very intimidating place to go and play. So I think like Fulham will be obviously I have to give honorable mention to Arsenal, but just being obviously with my own bias, like I'm super super critical of my own team. Just knowing that I've been a fan for so long, like I'm not gonna get on my high horse because we're top of the league, right? Like I know that we we needed to go and get some midfield players, and it's looking like it might bite us, right? So like until I see, obviously our first big test of the year will failed. So until I see a kind of consistency, that I was still proud of how we played. I think we lost that game, and me and you talked about this even after the game. Is that we lost that game from just naivety, right? Like just being naive. Like you've gotten back into the game 1-1, and all you need is a 10-15 minute spell to just because United is looking for a reaction. They're looking to immediately capitalize. And then what do
To
you
finish
do?
the game off,
You
right?
go and lose the ball. You're up pressing, and then you go and try to play. Lokonga tries to play an ambitious pass, loses the ball. One pass, Ericsson plays Rashford in behind, and that's it, right? So like I said, I'm still super critical. So, but just looking at like where the
I,
team
I
has come
think
from, like
so.
Fulham, like coming
I
from like
think
being promoted, I think Fulham is my team for sure.
yeah, that's that. I was actually very shocked by that pick, and now that you explain and talk about what they've done, I think I see your point very well. Like I think Fulham, um, they were a relegated team, right? They nobody's like, people were expecting them to fight it up with Nottingham Forest and the others, and but they came in here, they're making a statement saying I'm here, we're here to stay. Basically, that's
Yeah,
what they're saying. Um, and just going back to the Arsenal Man United game, I think you Arsenal, you guys are there's something cooking, right? Because I was watching again, I was like, man, you outplayed us, right? But the only thing it felt like when you guys tied it, I didn't understand. You When you tie a game, usually you dominate the game, right? You just make your stamp on it, and I think that maturity is lacking in Arsenal, right? The system is in
yeah,
place. The system is in place. Like I see what Arteta is doing. Like hands down, United fan, I'm critical too, but you guys balled us out. You balled us from start to finish. Like if there was a neutral fan who saw the game, would be like, how is it possible that Arsenal lost the game? And just going back to it, I just think that next level of maturity amongst
yeah,
the players is kind of
exactly.
missing. But
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
um, yeah, good call on the Fulham, man. Like I didn't even see it that way. That was a good call. Like I think, yeah, Fulham's been great.
yeah.
One question though, who? So just one team. I need your answer. Who do you think is winning the league?
City,
All right, all right. There you have
Arsenal
it.
in second though.
The predictions are out. I did not ask for second. I said who's winning the league. Well, yeah, I'm on the same page with you. I think Manchester City are going to take it home.
Yeah,
There's no question about it. All right. Well, moving on. Number two, sports circling around the world. We're moving into a different sports, the NFL. The season just kicked off on, I believe, on Thursday, right? This past Thursday. And there's been a lot of talks. There's been a lot of great teams. Um, there's been a lot of players coming in drafted, and I think this is going to be one of the biggest NFL seasons yet. I mean, every year we say that, and we're not disappointed at all times. So talking about your favorite NFL team coming into the 2022 season, who do you have?
Uh, you know how I feel about NFL, man. Like there's just so many good storylines.
I mean, I could start it off just to keep you if you
So
want
okay,
that.
I actually have one, but the thing is, like, I was thinking about it before, like the show, and I was like, man, but I also like,
Right. So just a full disclosure, we were supposed to shoot this episode before the start of the NFL season. So keep in mind that whatever results come out, these results or whatever opinions that we have, this was developed right before the kickoff of the
yeah,
NFL season that happened, I believe, on the
yeah,
8th of
eighth, yeah,
September. So yeah.
yeah. So for me, I think the Buffalo Bills, like, I think is my favorite team, and I'll tell you why. So obviously, it might seem obvious because obviously like they have Josh Allen, they're on the upside, they're doing a lot of good things, right? But if you think about the fact that last year they didn't even make the AFC Championship game, right? Like, you know, so many, it was an insane game. Like, they just their defense just wasn't there when they needed it, like down the stretch. Like, they kept, allowing these 2 minute drives, like, just boom. As soon as they score, they work their way down the field, they would get scored on again. But I think the Bills, like, if you just look at like their body of work, like they were able to add Von Miller like to their defense, and I think that was the missing piece with the Bills because they run the football well, and by running the football right, like you look at their number of yards, right? Like they run the football well. They're a well coached team. They have a great like offensive coordinator, and then Sean McDermott, like just from his experience, like coming, like he knows how to make in-game adjustments, right? And he has the personnel to do that. And I feel like just like in that like regard, like they have just gotten that much better by improving their defense. And everyone is like, well, they only added Von Miller, and like Von Miller was like MVP, like what, like almost 7 years ago. But the thing is, like, and we've had these conversations in the past, right? Like, for teams that win Super Bowls, like, you need veteran presence in your locker room. Like, you need like players that are gonna hold like their personnel like accountable. That was the Ray Lewis effect too. Like, everyone knew that Ray Lewis, like towards the end of his career, like Ray Lewis was not as explosive, but the other team, Ray is there. Once Ray is there, Ray is gonna quarterback that defense. He's gonna talk to his guys, like to know what to do. He knows he's a very intelligent person. So sometimes you don't even need like the quarterback of your defense to be your most dominant player, but he's just the one that can make sure like the whole team. So that's the Von Miller effect. And of course, no knock on Von Miller. Like, Von Miller can still play. Like, he is still a top linebacker in the league, right? So I just feel like adding that like extra bit to the defense has made like has made the Bills like that team that I think just that team can really really go a long way this season. Obviously, the AFC East is looking up like this year. Like, I'll just honorable mention. I like the Jets. I think they drafted really well. I think they're only a few years away from really getting back to that level. Like, the project that you can see what they're trying to build, but just the degree of difficulty in the division, it's anyone's, like, it's an argument, like, if their division is difficult or not with, like, the Patriots and all. But I think this year they're really, like, the AFC, like, they're really going to make a very, very deep run. Now, my only concern is yes, they run the football well, but if you look at a lot of those yards, like it's mostly their quarterback, right? They're like Josh Allen is the one, like, and there's just we've seen it time and time and time again. We've seen it with Cam Newton. We haven't seen it with Lamar yet, but Cam Newton, Michael Vick, like all the quarterbacks that love to run the football, like it eventually starts to wear you down. So I know I hope that Sean McDermott is gonna address that this season. Like, have a mix, like Singletary is running the ball well, so that's good. Like, he's somebody that you can utilize in those situations. Obviously, like Diggs, like, Diggs is gonna do his thing. Like I love like Knox, like at the tight end position. Like he's one of those guys that you can use like for a blocking tight end. So like I just think the Bills are building something really special. I love Josh Allen. Like he's a nice big quarterback. Like just he's that like classic NFL quarterback. He has the physique. He has the arm strength. He can run the football, and he's very smart, right? And he's humble. So I think just that recipe is gonna bode well for the Bills like this year for sure.
Wow, that's crazy because I did have the Bills. I did have the Bills, so you just took it home with that. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, um, where I knew that these guys were dogs was the divisional round game against the Chiefs last year. They played Patrick Mahomes, and that's one of the greatest NFL games I've
Yeah,
ever seen. Um, and I think there was just something about Josh Allen, right? Like, when you see a player who has that dog
yeah,
mentality, like throughout the whole playoff last year, he has the best passer rating,
that's
QBR,
right.
and
Yeah.
passer rating throughout the playoffs ever in a playoff series, just two games. I think he had five. I think he had 9 touchdowns, right, in 2 games, and just going back to what they're doing, right? You mentioned it, right? Like the Bills has been a project that we've all seen
Yeah.
develop over the
Mhm.
years, right? Josh Allen comes in from North Dakota. This question about his quarterback pocket passing. Is he a running quarterback? Is he a passing quarterback? And then he starts to develop into this monster of a player. And ever since Brady left the AFC East, they all of a sudden it's the Bills East now. The Bills own it, right? They've been AFC North champs back to back. Last year they were 11-6, and you know let's keep it real. The only team that I see giving them a problem in the AFC East is the Miami Dolphins, right? Um, that's the only team I see, but I don't see
Yeah.
anybody else, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's.
that's
I mean,
why
people, anyone
I
can
had.
argue. They can argue that the Patriots. It's still a Belichick team, so you can't.
It's still a Belichick's team, right? But it's not the same Patriots
Yeah,
without Brady, right? So that's why I don't really look at them, and I really don't
I think Mac
I
Jones is
really
gonna
don't
have a
look at.
decent year this year, though.
I don't know. Like I have so much doubts with him, especially looking at last year. I don't know how he made the Pro Bowl, but I guess he did. But he just doesn't have that. I feel like he's a quarterback that needs to be coached, which works, right? It works in the league. You can coach quarterbacks to win Super Bowls. That's fine. But I don't know how he responds very well to coaching. That's why I don't see them as a threat. Obviously, I don't see the Jets, and Miami is the only team which I feel the Bills can still
Yeah,
beat them, right? And it's been the only team that I think that it might be a problem for the Bills are the Chiefs. Now, keep in mind the Chiefs are not as strong as they were last year. They lost Tyreek Hill, right? So I don't really see them being that much of a threat to the
Mhm.
Bills. But looking at the record, every time the Bills were trying to get over that hump, it was always the Chiefs that was in their way. But now Tyreek Hill is gone to Miami. You're looking at a not so difficult schedule if you end up meeting the Chiefs in the playoffs. Like it's a different type of
yeah,
ball game, and what we saw in the season opener, I bet you I would put my money on the
yeah,
Bills. I would put my money on the Buffalo Bills to get
yeah.
over it,
Absolutely.
right? And just you know, overall as a team, like you talked about Von Miller, right? We saw what he did, 2 sacks opening day. Um, that was a it's like it was a perfect pick. Like it's not even a question
Yeah.
about it. They knew why they paid him that much money, right? Talk about Ken Dorsey, offensive
Yep.
coordinator. He just got promoted, right, from the QB
Yep.
coach. You talk about Leslie Frazier, defensive
Coordinator. Yep.
coordinator, right? They're doing the thing up in the Bills, right? These guys are they have been a unit for over 3 years. It's like a ticking bomb that's just waiting to explode, right? And we've watched them over the years just get over different obstacles and stages. Like we all know if the rules hadn't changed, or rather if the rules are what they changed right now after Patrick Mahomes threw the fadeaway to Kelsey, we know that the Bills were going to
Yeah.
win that game. Because I don't know how with 13 seconds you drive you drive the ball
Yeah,
all the
bro.
way
Like,
to kick a field goal and still tie the game. Like I don't know, the Chiefs are a different breed,
yeah,
but yeah, I think both of us are on the same page with this one. I think the Buffalo Bills are they're forced to reckon with
yeah. I
this
think,
this
and
year, and
I,
I have them winning the Super Bowl.
yeah, I think them, and I'll just give a honorable mention to the Tampa Bay Bucks for the obvious reason. I just feel like you can't not be excited to watch the team just because you want to see you want to keep seeing if this man just always has an
If he
extra
can push
motor, like
push the limit,
an extra
yeah,
gear. And,
yeah,
and this man, obviously, for our viewers, like Tom Brady, obviously, like announced his retirement and came back out of retirement, and he's because and then I'm just the Bucks. I'm just excited for a lot of things. I love Todd Bowles. Like I think he's just a great defensive mind. Obviously promoted from defensive coordinator, but Todd Bowles project, obviously being an African American coach, I'm very very excited to see that dynamic between him and Brady, but also
yeah.
I still think Mike Evans can play. They still have Leonard Fournette,
Hmm.
who's a beast. Like they just added Russell Gage, I think, at the wide receiver position. So they have
Yeah.
a lot
Julio
of
Jones too. Don't forget about Julio
what's
Jones.
that?
Julio Jones. They added Julio
Exactly.
Jones too. Don't
Well,
forget about him.
people might argue that Julio has not really done anything in the last few years, but you can't disregard it because we see that Antonio Brown was starting to gel with Brady before he had his issues. But that's by the by. But I think the Bucks can really really do I don't know that they will make it to the Super Bowl, but I'm just excited to see that project, how it's gonna work.
That project, right, right. If I was to give an honorable mention to a team, um, I think one team that I'd say to be on the lookout for would be the Chargers. Um, the only issue I have with them is they're a very young
Yeah.
team, um, but that boy, man, Justin Herbert, that boy has a cannon of an arm. Like his arm is people. You could almost say he has the best arm in the league. Like there's talks about it. Like Justin Herbert has one of the best arms in the league, but I I, I have them. They're a dark horse in
Bro,
the
so you
NFL.
want you want
They're
to
a
know
dark
what's
horse.
crazy? So that was going to be my next I actually have the Chargers. Herbert was actually and I mean we can roll right into it. Herbert is actually my favorite.
Yeah, we well so the on the next so for number one, what we wanted to discuss in terms of the sports activities circling around the world. We wanted to talk about the our favorite NFL players coming into the 2022 NFL season. We just talked about the favorite NFL team. So in terms of favorite NFL player, um we did kind of talk about him a lot. I have Josh Allen too as well. Um I don't know. I don't even think I think we've already said everything that needs to be said about this dude. This guy is he's an amazing, amazing athlete. 6'6", 6'5", people call him 245 or
Yeah,
something. 36 touchdowns last year. I think he's gonna break that record, probably reach about 40 something. 149 passer rating in 2021 playoffs. Um, I have him winning the MVP, and I just think that he's a dynamic player in the league, especially players who run and can pass. And it's not just one of your passes where it's like it does a dink and dunk, do a check down on a flat route or something
yeah,
like that, like or like a quick slant. Like this dude, you want him to make a 60-yard, he's gonna do it. He would throw that ball 60 yards and it will be
yeah,
accurate,
yeah,
straight up. Like that's how I see like this guy is molded into that kind of play. And that's the dangerous thing about him, right? You don't know what you're gonna get from Josh Allen in a
yeah,
game, right? Like for example, you see a guy like Patrick Mahomes. He's a runner, right? But he's not a run
yeah,
first guy,
yeah,
right? But Josh Allen can come in the game and say, "Hey, I'm gonna run through you, and there's nothing you can do
yeah,
about it." Right? So he reminds me of like now people don't overreact, right? But I think Josh Allen is what Cam Newton was supposed to be. I'm just gonna put it out there because I know Cam, Super Cam, and all that MVP, but we all know Cam doesn't have an
yeah,
arm, right? He can't throw the ball. He's not accurate, right? He's got strength, right? He can run, he can do the quick check downs. He's a smart football player, right? But I just think who Josh Allen is right now is a guy who the league should be very, very scared. Now, keep in mind, I do have issues with his health because I don't know when you take that amount of hits on your body, it kind of builds up, right? I understand you're trying to push players down and all, but we got to be real with ourselves. Like the NFL is a contact sport, right? That's a lot of hit on your body, and we all know that with Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Lamar, and all these guys who run, right? They take a lot of hits, so that's my only issue with him. But aside from that, I think he is an exceptional player, and I have him as MVP.
yeah. For me, yeah, like we were saying, you touched on like the Chargers. Oh, excuse me. You touched on the Chargers, but yeah, for me, like Justin Herbert, like is my favorite player. Like just like when you look at like the fact that so the thing with Herbert is like I remember when he came into the league and I was so excited because I feel like the Chargers had a team like from time, but they were lacking that quarterback. And I mean, no offense, like I liked Anthony Lynn, like I liked the Anthony Lynn project, right? But I just feel like he didn't like achieve like the most with that team just because they were one like quarterback away from like getting to that next level, and then they bring Justin Herbert in. Obviously, there were doubts about him too. Obviously, like coming from a Pac-12 division like with Oregon, like the Pac-12 is not really seen as like a very very difficult like football division. So they win, they win the Pac-12 championship like in 2019, and then 2020 obviously has that amazing Rose Bowl game, and everyone is still like, oh well, we don't know like if he's quite on the level of like the Josh Allens and them boys, right? Like Matt Jones and those guys. But I think just when I look at that cannon of an arm, like to be that accurate, like if you think about the fact that Keenan Allen, right? Keenan Allen had like 2 down years, like prior. And then all of a sudden, like Keenan Allen is back to being one of the best receivers in the league. And then you have a resurgent Keenan Allen now with the Chargers. You have Mike Williams, Mike Williams is trying
Mike
to
Williams, yeah.
refine that JoJo, that mojo again, right? And then you put that with Brandon Staley, who's a great coach, like proving that he knows what he's doing. And then they go and add Khalil
They got a
Mack.
great run.
They
Uh,
go and add Khalil
Khalil
Mack to
Mack.
deep
Don't forget the run game too.
with
Austin
Eckler. I
Eckler,
was
man.
gonna mention Eckler.
Yeah,
So Eckler, right? Like the guy is just like I remember like Eckler of like 3 years ago. Like they had And I feel like he didn't really get to shine under Melvin Gordon. Like, they had when Melvin Gordon was going through all those like issues that he was having, like Eckler was just the guy that, he would catch the ball out the backfield. But nobody even knew that he was a dog, just like in his ability to run through the tackles. So having that, like with a quarterback who has a cannon like that, a well coached team, and then they're playing in LA, like the lights, like everything. It's just I just like, but yeah, Justin Herbert,
Th-
like for me, like that kid, like watch out for that
That's
kid
a
this season because I think
that's a solid. So I like Justin Herbert. That's a no brainer, right? That's a like I can't even take that away from you, right? One question I wanted to touch on was the maturity of the Chargers, right? Especially with the young coaches that they have. I mean, they brought in Khalil Mack, veteran presence. They still have the what's the edge rusher who has a brother in San Francisco? Bosa, the Bosa brothers,
yeah,
the other
Nick
Bosa,
Bosa.
um, Nick Bosa. They have a solid defense, right? Derwin James just got paid, but overall, are the Chargers ready to make the next step? Right? Like, for example, you see the call that they made against the Raiders last year, right? That's something that has to do with maturity, right? You don't go for fourth down in your own half of the field, right? That's it doesn't have anything to do with if they because what he said was the analytics
Yeah,
said that they could go
yeah.
for it and they had a higher chance. But maturity rise, you know that you don't go for fourth down in your own half,
So the
right? So my question is, are the Chargers mature enough to make the next step?
so I think yes, like because whenever you have young projects like that, like you can look at just across the board, even with you can look at with Shanahan and the 49ers, right? Like they were a young, naive team as well that had similar issues with some of their play calling. You can look at even with Mahomes. Yes, they had Andy Reid, who's like a veteran, but they had their own naivety with them as well. You can look at the Rams, the Super Bowl champions, like with like Sean McVay, like they had a young core, like they also had an element of naivety to them. So I just feel like these experiences, like just when you have like the foundation down, I think like as you go through these experiences, like each time you kind of bring out like so obviously like you mentioned that fourth down, like they had no business against the Raiders, especially and with a resurgent Derek Carr, like you can't like they just it was ill advised, right? They're not gonna make the same like decision in a similar situation. So I just think like experience builds that maturity that you're looking for. Obviously, like what would have been very very scary is if they got to the Super Bowl. Like I'm not really a fan of young teams being too successful very early because it could it could have you can have that hangover which the Rams we know the Rams had that even before they made it back to the Super Bowl. Like you don't want a young team to see too much success early because one thing is that, and I know we were discussing this like a while back, but you try to always replicate like what got you to the mountaintop because for you it's like okay if we use this blueprint to get there, then how are we gonna like you just try to copy what you did? Meanwhile, the ideal thing to do is for you to take that blueprint and evolve it like a step further. So I just feel like the Chargers, knowing that they've played some playoff games, you know, they haven't really, like seen like enormous success, but they're using those experiences that they're gaining, like in games like the game versus the Raiders, for example. Like they're using those experiences, and I feel like they're gonna get that maturity. Like they don't. I don't feel like they have a lot of. They have a good balance between veteran presence and like the young, the like the young like players in the locker room, and I think that's always a good balance. I think eventually that's what's like. You can see the 49ers what they're trying to do, right? They've been to two NFC championship games. Like they, you can see what they're trying to do there. The same goes with like the Chiefs as well. Like with Mahomes, like Tariq, they had all these explosive players, but I just feel like that element of immaturity that you were talking about, and I think the same case is with the
Yeah.
Chargers. Like I feel like eventually they're gonna. I,
Eventually, they would eventually it's more like if they would learn from their
exactly.
mistakes basically, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how the maturity goes in. I see your point. I see your point. Yeah, I just have to throw that question out because they've got so much talent on the team. It's
Yeah.
just but
I
yeah,
like the Chargers
it
this
is.
year, and
Yeah. That's a great one, man. Justin Herbert, definitely. I wouldn't even be surprised if he wins the MVP this year because we all saw it coming, right? So, yeah, yeah, man. Well, there you have it, man. The top five sports headlines circling around the world. It's a pleasure to have you finally.
yeah,
Pleasure to
thanks for
finally
having me,
get you
bro.
on
About
here.
time.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Coming in with your knowledge and your depth and everything. Definitely have to do this sometime again. Well, if you like this video, hit the like button, and if you want more content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Top Five Sports Podcast, and I appreciate you, Mahmoud, for joining us today. And thank you all to our viewers. This is the Top Five Sports Podcast. God bless.